As I mentioned, a few comments on the state statutes workshop where you were confused. If you don't see any of my pencil scribbles, it means everything's good. The main place that people got confused again was remembering the difference between last updated, in other words, when the database last updated the information, versus when a particular statute section was last amended. When we take a look at a specific state statute, I will review that again because it works the same way with states as it does with federal. So if you are still confused, please speak with me. As you'll see on assignment 2, which I will distribute at the end of class, I ask you those questions, so make sure you understand. Okay, other housekeeping assignments. Oh, speaking of the assignment 1 that you should have turned in by 4 o'clock, you should receive a response from me. If you haven't done so and you sent your assignment in after 3:30, I will reply tomorrow. Pretty much I come up here and I don't have access to email. And I've had some funkiness with my email today, so if I didn't get back to you and you sent it before 3:30, just pop me an email and I will make sure to get back to you tomorrow if I have received it. The reason I go through this whole thing is that a couple of times it's wound up in my, people's assignments wound up in my spam folder, and I've had to work through getting that fixed. So I want to make sure that it's not happening, so that's why I do the reply. I will get the assignment 1 back to you with my comments and grades next week, hopefully by Thursday, and that will be via email. What I'm going to do is the Word document that you sent to me, I'm going to put comments in the side. So make sure that you can see those comments. If you can't, let me know and we'll figure it out. Last piece of housekeeping, the exam. I know some of you had requested it earlier. Unfortunately, given everybody's exam schedules, I couldn't do it any earlier. I would have liked that too, but people had conflicts. So the exam will be either, and it's your choice, on Monday the 8th, May 8th, or Tuesday the 9th. You will pick it up at 9 a.m. and it will be due at 5 p.m.
I have fun on the 8th.
So you will do it on the 9th.
Oh, I see. Individually. They can't. Wait, does it have to be uniform with everyone?
No. You choose. So some of you I know have conflicts on one of those days. That's why we have 2 days. So if you have conflict on the 8th, pick it up on the 9th. I don't think anybody has a conflict on the 9th, so you get to choose whether you do the 8th or the 9th. Question?
So like mine on the 8th is at 1 p.m. So 8 a.m. would be in the 24-hour.
That is not a conflict. The conflict would only be if you had a late exam and then an 8:30 exam.
There recently changes.
I know that I'm sorry about that. As I said, I tried to find a couple or even 3 days that worked, but those were the only 2 days that actually did work. We will be going over the exam in detail the next to last class, where I will give you the questions, and we will also go over the whole procedure on how it will work. Any other questions on that? Okay. So today we will look at state statutes. And really today is kind of a review, in a way, of everything that we talked about, well, most of what we talked about last week, because it really works the same way for states with regard to statutes and codification as it does with federal statutes. So looking here at our sources of the law handout that we started with last week, we see, and focusing on New York, but this works pretty much the same. It's just the names have been changed in different states. So we might call it something in New York and something different in California or New Jersey or any of the other states. So taking a look here in New York, of course, we have the government established by the New York Constitution. We also have municipal governments. We'll be talking more about municipal law and how to find it when we talk about administrative law. So I'm not really going to cover that today, but you can see how it is, again, parallel with what we know about state and federal to a lesser extent, but still somewhat. And as I said, we'll talk about that more in detail later on. So let's focus on the state, specifically New York, with our government being established by the Constitution. Of course, we have the three branches, just like we did with federal, legislative, executive, judicial. Again, the names are slightly different in different states. So focusing on the legislative. So everybody remember what the generic name is for a law that's passed by the legislature and signed by the executives. Somebody or somebody's, just yell it out. Generic name. It's on the chart. Session laws. Right there. Session law. Enacted by legislature, organized chronologically. Okay. And we see, what is it called in the federal world? The specific name in the federal world for session law is public law. Okay, no trick questions. And the name in New York is chapter law. Thank you. Not that hard. Okay. So different states, as I said, have different names. I believe in New York, in California and New Jersey, it's also called chapter law. I know some of you are interested in those states. I know, for instance, in Connecticut, it's called a public act. I used to practice there, so that's why I know that. I don't know what other names other states may have, so you kind of have to go with the flow. But if you remember, session law is the generic name, federal is public law, and then kind of go with the flow with the state, sometimes chapter law, sometimes other, you'll be good. And you can see on our chart, we find chapter laws in something called McKinney session laws. Okay. So what happens to those chapter laws or session laws? Just like in the federal realm, we find the laws, the statutes as they currently exist. In other words, the law as it exists today. Where do we find that? Again, on the chart. U.S. Code. Everybody following this? So, going across, we would find the laws in subject arrangement as they currently exist today for New York. Where? Not that hard. McKinney's, thank you again. Okay, so you want to remember the difference. McKinney's, and I'm going to explain, McKinney's confuses a lot of attorneys because you see McKinney's, there's the McKinney's session laws, and then there's the McKinney's what are called consolidated laws. And I write down black volumes on this chart for a reason, which we will be looking at shortly. Okay, so again, the same exact concepts apply. Session laws are organized chronologically, passed by legislature, signed by the executive, governor in the state, president in the federal government. Get organized by subject, put into a code, codification. Remember the force from our screencast? The code is what the law is today, if you're looking at the current one. That's really what you're going to be spending most of your time in when you're researching the law, because you want to know what it is today. So it's going to be organized by subject, and that's going to be in something called a code. U.S. Code, federal, different states have different names for it. Here in New York, typically McKinney's, there is another set called CLS. It's just a competitor. Stands for Consolidated Law Service, and we'll take a quick look at that as well. Okay. So let's get to some more practical questions. We have a client, right? She wants to sue her HMO. So we looked into starting to get to know a little bit about federal law and what we need to worry about. Do we know what New York state law is with regard to our client? Yet? Anybody? So where might we want to start? Somebody? Just shout out or raise your hand. I'm not fussy.
Like which resource?
We want to find out what New York law applies to our client. Where would you suggest? I come to you and say, where do I start?
Yes, you can start with Westlaw.
Okay, where on Westlaw?
Oh.
What should I look at? What's that? Secondary sources. When you don't know anything Anybody remember a good secondary source in New York if you don't know anything about a particular subject? NY Jur. Now, it doesn't have to be, there you go. It doesn't have to be NY Jur. If you go on Westlaw and just do a search and go on secondary and find something else, that's okay too. I think you might remember, maybe you remember, when we did some secondary source searching a couple of weeks ago, we ran into some interesting New York Law Journal articles. We found that ALR article, which is New York specific, but still seemed to be helpful. Maybe it would give us some New York stuff. I don't think it does actually, but we also ran into New York Jur. And Westlaw went and signed me off. Just signed in. Go figure that. Okay. So, any number of ways of getting to New York Jur. This is probably the expensive way because I'm searching all state and federal. If I wanted to be more cost efficient, I would narrow that maybe down to all fed New York. Maybe I'd narrow it to secondary. Depends on, if I knew I wanted secondary, that's how I would do it. So I'm going to, since I didn't, go to secondary here. Or I could just type in New York Jur up top. Which is probably what I should have done right now for sake of expediency. So learn from my mistakes. So I'm going to narrow to New York now. And then New York jurisprudence, which is what I really should have done. Okay, so here are a couple of sections. Here's one labeled Health Maintenance Organization. I think the group that looked at New York Jur when we were looking at secondary sources found this section. And it talks about New York, and sure enough here in footnote 2, it refers us to a section in the public health law of New York. Again, just a reminder, statutes especially are really tough to dive into first. I know since we had just talked about McKinney's, some of you were tempted to say, let's go first to McKinney's. But when you don't really know where to go or much about the law, typically a secondary source or maybe even an index, and you can try doing a keyword search. Okay, so here we have what the state statute looks like. And what we will do is, again, go what I like to call bimodal, and we'll be looking on Westlaw and through our walkthrough, which is what the state statutes look like in print. And again, we focus on print, and actually we will be doing our workshop today in print. We're going to take a field trip again down to the library because there are a lot of people who still prefer the print, a lot of attorneys who still prefer the print. Now, I know you all, most people tend to like it online, but there are occasions where, again, because of this very narrow vocabulary that statutes use, sometimes the print just makes it easier. So good to be able to use both formats. Okay, so taking a look at Westlaw first, since we're probably more familiar with that, we have basically the same exact features we saw with the U.S. Code Annotated. We have our table of contents. Ever useful, I would say just about always look at the table of contents when you're looking at statutes. Maybe take a look at the sections just around yours, so that would be this link here. And you can scan up and down and see if anything sounds promising. So taking a look here, I might look at health maintenance regulation of contracts. We talk about a possible breach of contract cause of action. I would also take a look here at pretty much the broadest topic that's still relevant. So health maintenance organizations, all of Article 44, so I would just take a look at that. It's pretty much the same list we saw before and see what looks useful. Again, can't stress, especially with statutes, how useful a table of contents. You might get a reference to a statute section from New York Juror, from another secondary source, from doing your keyword search and getting into the statutes that isn't quite the right one, but looking at the table of contents 2 sections or 3 sections earlier or later might be the section that you want. Or that might be several sections. Remember, also look for definition sections. Okay. Also, we're in an annotated code. Once again, your very BFF, your best friend. Notes of decisions. You will find cases that interpret this statute, this section. Likewise, you have context and analysis. If you're not quite sure what this means, there are law review articles, there are a couple of ALR, there are other encyclopedia references. Maybe there are other New York Juror sections you didn't find with your keyword search that might help you understand. So again, use the wonderful tools that the annotated code provides for you. What the annotated code also gives you are citing references. Citing references are slightly different than context and analysis or notes of decision. Citing references will just tell you what it sounds like, where our section, in this instance 410, is cited. The document in which it's cited may not have anything to do with what you're interested in or even much to do with 410. It may mention it just as an aside, or it may say section 410 has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But if it's cited, it's going to be in citing references. So you can see notes of decisions. There are 10 notes of decision. That means there are 10 cases that discuss 410. Section 4410, 4410. Citing references, if we highlight that, notice there are 18 cases. So if you think about it, that should make some sense. 10 cases discuss section 4410 substantially. 18 cases mention it. So we'll probably find the 10 cases in the notes of decisions plus 8 that just mention it as an aside. So the one thing the notes of decisions will do for you, in addition to giving you cases that talk about your section, is it's going to tell you the different topics. Now, there are only 10 cases, so you could really just scan through all 10, right? But you're going to run into sections where there are hundreds of notes of decisions, and you don't really want to be reading all 100 of them, right? So that's where these topics are going to come in very useful. And that's what the notes of decisions have. Citing references, a little bit different. Again, it's just cited. So it could talk about anything. It could not talk about it much at all. Of course, we have other types of materials like secondary sources. But the one thing the cases do for you in citing references is, drum roll please, since it's taking so long, is within your state. So you can see I'm narrowing down on the filter, so I'm saying state. Not surprisingly, most of the citing references for New York statutes going to be New York cases. It gives it to you by department. Now we will be talking about authority when we talk about cases and why it's important to keep track of what your department is. So we'll come back to this when we talk about cases, but for now, keep in mind that notes of decisions and citing references are somewhat different. If you don't remember the exact differences, that's okay. Just understand they do different things, and it might be worthwhile to look at both and then to filter through both. At least filter through the citing references. Notes of decisions really don't have too many filters. So the other thing we will find back here is, of course, how current this statute section on Westlaw is, when it was last updated. So Westlaw's not. So who can tell me when it was, not the date it was last updated, but when it was last updated by what chapter? Or it's current through what? Say it a little louder. 2017, chapters 1 through 6. So again, a few people got this a little bit confused in the workshop, so I'm going to try again to to clarify, and if I don't succeed, please come ask. So, when the section is last updated, that means when the resource, whether it's Westlaw, whether it's Lexis, whether it's print, last updated the information. And Westlaw, frankly, isn't all that useful because it just tells us 2017 chapters 1 to 6. It doesn't give us a date. When was section 4410 last amended? By Chapter 705. And the people who saw that saw basically, here's the last chapter law listed under credits. Westlaw calls it credits. I don't know why, but you just have to get used to it. So under credits, the last one is the one it's last amended, 1996, by Chapter 705. And actually, this particular section was Section 5 within Chapter 705. So what does this whole credits thing mean? So what does this mean? Added 1976 C938. When this section was first added. And then it tells us here amended, so that's pretty straightforward, right? By, what was it amended by? Chapter 538, which was in what year? 1993. And what's the semicolon mean, everybody? Everybody? And amended by, I know it's silly, but hopefully it's going to help. So, and amended by, and as we already said, the last chapter that amended this, Barbara already said, Chapter 705 in 1996. So, amended is in the credits on Westlaw. Last updated by Westlaw is just here in the current through. We'll take a quick look at this on Lexis as well, so you're clear, as well as the print, so you're clear on the difference. Okay, in fact, let's do that now, since we've seen it on Westlaw. So what we are looking at on the handout, McKinney's Consolidated Laws, so turn to page 1 is just the title page. And so here is the code, so just like it said on the sources chart, here is McKinney's. And this is actually significant. This is McKinney, so it says here right on the front of the book, McKinney's Consolidated Laws. It's black, right? And here on the side, you see Public Health, section 4400 to end. So that we are looking at the title page of this very volume I have in my hand. And the reason this is significant is that when you look at this book on the shelf, right, you're not going to see that, you're just going to see that it doesn't say McKinney's. You have to know it's the black set. So I'm going to pass that around so you can get to know the black set very well. If you find yourself working for an organization that is strict about online and you come to visit us here at Hofstra, you're going to want to know if you're checking for the New York statutes as they currently exist, you're going to want to go to that black McKinney's set. So that's on our handout. That's what it looks like on the inside. So there's the title page, page 1. Page 2, we see the ever-useful table of contents that we already looked at on Westlaw. And so we see the beginning of Article 44. That's where we know our section, that's the overall section about health maintenance organizations. And we see the various different sections, and we might spot, scanning this, the section 4406 as well, 4410, talking about health maintenance organizations. So turning to our actual section, 4410, again on the top, you'll notice the handy-dandy arrow that's telling us it's Article 44. If you're looking at 4410 and you see, oh, look, it's Article 44, you can flip back to the beginning of Article 44, which is actually quite a number of pages in this particular instance. You'll see on pages 2 and 3, I circled the page numbers on the bottom so you can see the difference. So there's section 4410, there's the text. So turning the page to page 4, we see the rest of section 4410. And you'll notice what's called credits on Westlaw is actually just a parenthesis at the end of the section. So you don't even get the word credits in the print. You just have to know it's the parenthetical after the text of the section. And you see the same exact information we just read through, and I underlined for you the date that the section 4410 was last amended. And then we see some historical and statutory notes, which we'll talk about when we talk about legislative history. And then we see some of those context and analysis items, law review and journal commentaries. And again, that would be in this context and analysis tab. Turning the page to page 5, we see more research references, ALR, encyclopedias. We see some New York Juror references to help us out. And then we see our wonderful notes of decisions with those topics to help us determine what cases interpret our section 4410. So all looks pretty much the same. Turning on page 6, again, more notes of decisions. You don't really get citing references in the book other than the secondary sources. So we're done checking the book, right? Right? Yeah? No? No! Update, update, update. So you didn't get a really loud one because you were all on the right. You all were thinking about it. Excellent. So there's our pocket part. Y'all remember the pocket part in the back of the book? Mariella, hold up and show us the pocket part. Ah, beautiful. So there's our 2016 pocket part. And what you see when you turn to 4410 in the pocket part is not a lot. And what that's telling us is there's no substantial update to the text of 4410. So we are up to date in the main volume. The only thing that's changed are there's some updated research references, so more up-to-date secondary sources for us, and there might be more updated notes of decisions. Not in our case for 4410. Actually, on page 9, I showed you the section in the pocket part 4406 that we talked about might be relevant regulation of contracts. So what you can see in 44.6 is what a pocket part will look like when there is an update. So 44.6, you absolutely had to check the pocket part if you were relying on print because that's what the law is now, or as close to now as we can get in the print. So one thing, speaking of updating, is notice here back on Westlaw, we have a yellow flag. What Westlaw does for us with statutes, we saw this with the U.S. Code annotated also, is it lets us know when there's proposed legislation. In the very rare instance where there is a statute that passed that's just not incorporated into the text of the section yet, you should see a red flag. But now you can at least click on this and see, what might be coming down the pike in terms of new legislation. And actually not much because this is already in the last session from 2015. Any questions about the print? As I said, we'll be doing an exercise down in the library of print state statutes just so you can get your hands on the books. And again, because a lot of times where attorneys still use the print tends to be mostly secondary sources, print treatises, and statutes. So that's what we will use. And as I mentioned, turning the page to page 10, you may either need to because you don't have access to Lexis and Westlaw, or you're asked not to use it, or maybe you're just not getting anywhere with your keyword searching and you want to try an index, which sometimes is a good way to identify good keywords to then use online. So here is what the index looks like in print. Again, not surprising, it comes at the end of the set typically. So what you can see is if you just look under the topic health maintenance organizations, I don't have any handy dandy arrow, I don't really think it's necessary, but you'll notice a lot of abbreviations. PubHe. Anybody know what PubHe stands for? You see PubHe in the index? And you guessed that because we were looking at public health, right? Well, there may come a time, pass this around, where you don't know because you didn't. No, absolutely, that you can't guess. So what you want to know about print indexes and print resources generally is that they're using abbreviations. Somewhere they're going to tell you what those abbreviations mean. Typically, it's in the beginning of the volume with the abbreviations, but I can't promise you that's going to happen every single time. But that's the first place I would look. So if you take a look at page 11, and that's in the beginning of the index that Barbara now has, you will see the abbreviations used throughout the print index. And I don't know about you, but I could maybe guess ABPROP, but ABC, unless I already knew what it was, I wouldn't be able to guess that. CORR, maybe, maybe not. Point being, good to know, if you see an abbreviation, think, well, they got to tell me what that means. Start in the beginning of the volume. And you'll see that continued on page 12. So one other aspect of a code that we were looking at last time was the popular name table. Remember, we use a popular name table when someone referred us by name. So whether it was the Civil Rights Act, or perhaps in the state, there might be a Civil Rights Act in the state. If all you have is the name, it's nice to know that there's a table that will tell you where to find that act in the code. So on Westlaw here, if you go to just McKinney's, and you can get there just as I did by just clicking on McKinney's, or you can just navigate to McKinney's through the Browse menu, you will actually see a popular name table listed here, as well as the index, by the way, if you want to look at the index online. But here's the popular name table online. In print, again, if you find that you are using print statutes for whatever reason, the popular name table in the USCA is a separate volume. In state statutes, tends to be the last volume of the index. Sometimes it's separate, sometimes it isn't. So look for a separate one. Look after the letter Z if you're not finding a separate one. So that's what you see on page 12A. I'm picking on you today, Joannis. I don't know why. So you'll see page 12A is the popular name table. Any questions? So let's go briefly back to bring us full circle to our section. Oh, look, there's 4410. And we looked through our credits and we discovered that the last time that 4410 was amended was in 1996. And as I mentioned, you find the session laws. So the session laws in New York equals chapter laws. Again, session law is the generic name. It's like soda. And chapter law is the brand. It's the New York brand name. It's like Coke or Pepsi. Take your pick. Okay, so session law is generic. Chapter law, New York specific. So we find our New York chapter law in the McKinney's session laws, which again you'll find online and in print. And in print, it looks like page 13. And online, it looks like if you just click on the link, which you all know how to do, so we don't need to worry about that. But here's where the color of the books actually makes a difference. So somewhere or another, there's the black McKinney's. Whoever has it, could you just hold it up? Yeah, there we go. All right, we'll do a compare and contrast. So, okay, Wendy, I'm going to pick on you because I've been picking on Joanna. So, do you see the word McKinney's on the black? No. Do you see the word McKinney's on the red? Yeah. So, if somebody said to you, go find McKinney's, which volume would you pull? That's because I warned you already. Good answer. Excellent answer. However, there are lots of attorneys who weren't warned. And they will go, and these are attorneys, not law students, they will go and they say, oh, I need McKinney's, and they'll pull the red, and then they'll come to the reference desk and they'll say, I can't find section 4410 of the public health law, or whatever section is they're looking for. And they're looking through McKinney's and they're confused because there's a date here on there, and they're not quite sure what to do with that, and then you open it up. So if you take a look on page 14, you can see what the chapter look like, and there's nothing like public health 4410. That's because McKinney's on the red in the session laws has it on the spine, And McKinney's, the actual code that you want to be looking in most of the time, doesn't. And that confuses people. So Wendy is now not confused. Hopefully that's true for everybody else. And I shall not pick on Joanna and pass this around again, even though you've seen at least the black McKinney's, the code. So the session laws inside the McKinney's red set, the session laws look like they do on page 14. So notice it says sort of a third the way down on the page, chapter 705. Notice this says chapter 705. We already saw, as you can see on the top of the page, this is in 1996. And if we turn to page 15, lo and behold, you see section 5 of chapter 705 says, section 4410 of the Public Health Law is amended by adding new subdivision 4 to read as follows. So that's what all this means. Section 5 of chapter 705 in 1996 changed 4410. And it tells us here by adding another section. Everybody see the connection? Anybody not confused? It's okay to be confused. Better ask me now than when you're after you've handed in the assignment and still confused. Okie dokie. Let's see what all of this looks like on Lexis, because some of you might wind up working somewhere that only has Lexis. And hey, it's not even going to make me log in again. So this time I'm going to learn my lesson, and I am going to tell Lexis I want to search New York. Not only do I want to search New York, but I want to search statutes, which are actually up here. And I'm going to tell Lexis, okay, liability HMO, because you all know I'm a terrible typist. And we'll wait. Okay, so interestingly, we get, now maybe these are relevant, I don't know, I'd have to look at them, but we do know that 4410 and 4406 of the Public Health Code might be relevant, and it's not coming up at the first few. It's actually not coming up at the first page at all. And this is by way of reinforcing to you that plain language isn't always wonderful. And this is why it's kind of good to know our terms and connectors. Can't tell you when one will be better than the other, but if you're not getting relevant with plain language, and honestly, I start with plain language because it's easier. But then when I'm not finding anything that seems quite right, I'm going to say, okay, let me be a little more precise with terms and connectors. Now, the other thing you want to remember, and I also find that on Lexis, the plain language searching is not as good as Westlaw. I don't know if they'll sue me for saying that, we'll find out. The other thing you need to know about on Lexis, when you're searching statutes, Westlaw brings you straight into the codes. Lexis gives you lots of other stuff, and you need to tell it. If you want to see the code, that is, show me the code, and that's just a filter. And how did I, because I'm searching, how did I wind up in California? Because I did my automatic search. So let's get rid of California for the moment, and let's go back to New York. And what you will see is we're at least in the right area now. And at least it's in the top result. The very first one, so again, object lesson, don't expect your answer to always be number 1. It might not even be number 3, or it might not be on the first page. If it's stop, I would move from plain language to terms and connectors if it's not in the first couple of pages. I mean, you don't know what the right answer is yet, but again, if you're not finding relevant results. So let's take a look. Now that we've talked a little bit about searching strategy, let's take a look at the code again on Lexis, which is pretty much the same deal as federal. It looks the same as it did last week. The one difference, at least here in New York, and true for some other states, is here in New York we have two different publishers for our code. We have McKinney's, which is what most everybody uses, and in fact people just refer to New York Code as McKinney's, even though it is a brand name. We also have CLS, which stands for Consolidated Law Service. As it turns out, McKinney's is published by Thomson Reuters, also known as West, so that's why it's on Westlaw. CLS is now published by Lexis, which is why it's on Lexis. So here's what CLS looks like. The annotated material, so the notes and decisions, the secondary sources are going to be different because we've got different companies. The other difference you'll notice just by happenstance is that our volume of CLS that contains 4410 no longer has a pocket part because it just got too fat, and so they published a separate pamphlet. So if you are using print, you need to be bibliographic aware and check for both pocket part. Sometimes they're both. Depends on the publisher. And the separate pamphlet. So I shall pick on you again, Joanna, and pass this around. So that's what CLS in print. All the things we talked about print with regard to McKinney's, pretty much similar to CLS, as I said, other than the actual case notes and secondary sources. So again, question? So again, it looks a little different, but the concepts are the same. You've got your table of contents here. Definitely want to take a look at that. You also might want to take a look, click here in this heading material to see the table of contents as it's listed, which actually I kind of prefer. It just makes more sense to me to be able to look at it this way. That, of course, is a personal preference, but you have both available. And you here have the go-to menu, or you can just scroll, and we can take a look at the notes to decisions. We can take a look at the research references. We can take a look at the history. Again, all the different chapter laws that first enacted and then amended our particular section. Lexis also has a means of updating, and again, you would see a notice if there was a new session law, a new chapter law that had material that wasn't incorporated into the section yet. That's rare, but it does happen. And just like we have citing references on Westlaw, we can shepherdize Lexis. And again, you can look at cases. And then there are other citing sources, so there are other secondary sources, in addition to the research references, that you can look at. And as we saw with the U.S. Code Service on Lexis last time, the other difference is that you can also look at citing decisions, so cases, by specific subsection of the statute. So 4410 has a few subsections. Let's actually see if we can see anything. So we can see we can look at cases that just talk about 4410 subsection 2. And this is going to be particularly useful, I think, for those of you interested in tax, because you know tax has a million subsections, right? In the different sections. So if you just wanted a particular subsection, or securities law, that's another one that has a lot of subsections. So you could look at cases that just talk about a particular subsection. And that is true only for shepherds. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to show you on Lexis, and we'll go back, I'll show it to you on Westlaw also, since we didn't look at it. If you already had a section citation, somebody told you, go check this section of the New York Code. Lexis now has something called, on the very first page here, get a doc assistance. Because I don't know about you, I don't know, is it New York Pub He? Is it New York Public Health? Is it New York Public He? Is it Public Pub Health? How do I abbreviate it? No idea. I don't like to guess. I don't have the patience. So from here you can say, okay, I want statutes, and And I'm sure you all can figure it out from here, but just be aware of that get a doc assistance, and I can get my jurisdiction. And then I just need to scroll down to the appropriate code. There's lots of other stuff up there, rules and whatnot, but if you notice, scroll down, you get past it all, and you get to the New York Consolidated Laws. And I could scroll down to public health. Almost there. There it is, public health. And what Westlaw will do is give me a nice template. If you just remember that get a doc assistance, I think you can follow your nose from there. So before we go to Westlaw so I can show you the shortcut, let's just take a quick look at Bloomberg. And Bloomberg, again, to get an actual document, I tend to just type it in. They don't really have. And the trick with Bloomberg is to tell it you want to do a citation search. So don't automatically hit enter, which I do a lot of the time and then regret it. So I just type it all out. And Bloomberg, again, does not have quite the same features, annotated code that we've come to know and hopefully love on Lexis and Westlaw and print. But it does have, of course, the text of the section and what Bloomberg now calls smart code, which are some, basically, notes of decisions. And then finally, as promised, back on Westlaw, what you can do at any point is if you type in your state abbreviation and then the word statutes, you get this nice list. You can also browse here too and just look for whatever state it is, so NJ, CA, whatever your favorite state is, and then look on the right. When you pull up statutes and court rules or statutes, just look on the right for the find template. And you get what it sounds like, a template. And then you can scroll down again to the appropriate code and fill it in. You don't need to watch me scroll down to public health. So let's go back and let's try NJ statutes. Because New Jersey numbering is a little bit different than, so New Jersey find template, sure enough. And New Jersey just numbers. So New Jersey, when you get a site, you get a number, I don't know exactly the format of the number, but something like 42.103 or something like that. California is more like New York, where it names its codes. Any questions? Okay. That's pretty cool then. So let's go down, do our field trip in the library. So much of the time when you're doing state statutory research, you're going to be looking at a particular state. However, there are times when you want to see what other states are doing, either an individual state. Again, state statutes are authoritative only in that particular state. It doesn't tend to be they're not persuasive. So what New Jersey does isn't really persuasive in New York and vice versa, or California. But I do know that occasionally there are issues where you want to find out what's going on in most, if not all, the states. And I can attest to this from personal experience. When the earth was still cooling and I was practicing, I was given an assignment to find all of the state laws on underground storage tanks. Not one of my more exciting experiences as a practicing attorney, but that's what I was assigned to do. And sadly, I did not take advanced legal research, so I did not know that there are resources called 50 state statute surveys. So if you are ever assigned to find all the laws in the states on fill in the blank, You can look in several sources. Yes, you can obviously Google, but even that, you're going to have to click through how many links on Google? You don't have to do that if you have access to any of these sources. And yes, these are for fee, and on Lexis and Westlaw, they tend to cost quite a lot if they are outside of your plan. So make sure that you can either spend the money or they're inside your plan. But if you do get that assignment, the easiest way to get there is just in the search bar, and now that you know they exist, the number 50 state statutory surveys. And you can obviously search them, or you can browse. I kind of find browsing more effective because, again, the search terminology, if you don't pick the exact right word, you're not going to find something, even if it's on your topic and you just didn't pick the right word. So we know we're interested in health, and granted, we may not find something very much on point, but scroll through and see what might look useful, and my eyes aren't picking it up. So yeah, corporate practice of medicine, might want to look at that. I did find something, as you can see, my eyes are just not picking it up. Does anybody see it? Has to do with medical. Okay, we're just going to pick one. It doesn't really matter. There is something in there that says medical necessity. My eyes are not picking it up. But just so you can see what a state-by-state survey looks like, which is more to the point, you can see it just lists the statutes on whatever topic we chose, and it starts just alphabetically. Alabama, Alaska, there aren't any. You can scroll through, so that's what it looks like online, or you can download the PDF. It's worth looking at because it actually gives you more information, I think. So it gives you more detail about what that state does for that particular topic. And it gives you the citation, which at least in PDF you can't link to, and you can in the HTML. But I think you can probably see that if you get a horrible assignment like all 50 state underground storage tanks, if it has underground storage tanks, and honestly I've never looked because I'm still traumatized by the experience, but if it has it, it would have really made it less traumatic by far. So that's it if you're in a Westlaw world. If you are in a Lexis world, it works pretty much the same way. And you see Lexis 50 state statutes and regulations. And you can either just search it. So I just told Lexis add it to my search. So I would limit my search. Or what I like to do on Lexis is look at the table of contents. That's what those little lines mean. And here again are the listing of the 50 state surveys. And I scroll down and see what looks relevant. Healthcare law. And then maybe either managed healthcare or healthcare litigation. Let's see what medical malpractice actions look like, although it's pretty much along the same lines as what we just saw. In my experience, when I've done a little bit of work looking for 50 state surveys on various questions that I've had, I've actually found Lexis to have broader coverage if you do have a choice. Although, as you saw, that Westlaw had a lot, so it looks pretty much the same. It gives you the citations and some details about it. Another place to look is actually Hein Online. Remember, we know Hein Online is great for PDFs for journals. We know we find the U.S. code on it now. They also have 50 state surveys, and not logged into Hein Online. I know more than several of you had difficulties getting to CCH for the assignment. It should work. I corresponded with a number of you. It did work for me. I tested it at home and it did work for me at home. You shouldn't have any trouble if you were here. But there's some issues with what's called our proxy server. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but just to walk you through how I'm hoping it should work. It did this morning. You would have gone to CCH here. I'm going to go to Hein Online. What should come up when you see this Lexicat online catalog, it asks me for my name. So first name, last name. And then my unique ID, which is 700 number. You probably all have a 701 or a 702 number, just because Hofstra has had to increase its numbers as time has progressed. So 700, I'm putting in the rest. Typed it correctly. And this is how it should have worked for CCH, and it should have brought you to CCH at home. So knowing that people have difficulty and that we've had some issues with this whole proxy server thing, when I look at your assignments for that CCH question, I will do so very leniently, let's put it that way. So if you had difficulty or depending on what you found, I won't be very fussy about that, because I know there was some trouble. But thankfully, we got it to Hein Online without trouble. And the hardest part of using Hein Online for 50 state surveys is knowing that it's actually called subject compilations of state laws. You could remember to think to Control F state laws. You actually won't find it if you Control F 50 states, so that's probably the one drawback. Hein Online is a little bit different than what we just saw in Lexis and Westlaw. So again, we can search by keywords. I'm actually going to browse and go to HMO. Ooh, highlight it right there. How nice. So Hein Online is a little bit different in that it's going to give us citations to other sources that have references to the 50 state statutes rather than creating it on its own, which is essentially what Lexis and Westlaw did. So here we have a citation to a book, Corporate Practice of Medicine. And you can scroll down. Some of these Hein will link to, some of them you'll have to find separately. So you see what's there and what isn't. Hein will list some of the subject headings that it uses. So you can click on those to find others. We're actually just looking at the Health Maintenance Organization subject headings. And so you can see here, state-by-state guide to managed care laws. You actually get some good references of treatises that will also give you the 50 state laws. The other type of reference you will find in Hein Online that you won't find on Lexis or Westlaw is it actually gives you references to law review articles that have footnotes that reference 50 state statutes, or a good number of states. They may not have all 50. So here's an example, distinguishing between coverage and treatment decisions, left of ERISA preemption in the Buffalo Law Review back in 2001. It's a little old, but it could get you started. Probably I would go to Lexis or Westlaw first if it was available and not expensive. The nice thing about Hein Online is that if you do have it available to you, it's a flat fee. So once you have Hein Online, it's paid for. Or obviously, if you have access to a law library like us or somewhere else that has access to Hein Online, you can access them as well. Not something I expect you will spend a lot of time worrying about, but as I said, in real life, I got an assignment where I wish I knew about this. So I'm passing along to you. Another aspect of state laws, as some of you may have noticed as you were doing the last question in the workshop, one of the popular names I gave you was the UCC, Uniform Commercial Code. There are a number of these model and uniform acts that states may or may not enact, and what happens is a organization called, one of the organizations is the Uniform Laws Commission. And actually, they are responsible for the UCC, amongst others. These, as I mentioned last time, these group of experts sit down and think, what would it make sense for states to do in this particular area? So it might be uniform commercial transactions, or it might be partnership, or it might be probate. There's the Uniform Probate Code. I know some of the ACTEC folks get references to that a lot. So this Uniform Laws Commission, actually I think the best place to access this material is right where we are now, for free on the open web. It is also on Westlaw, which will at in a second, and Lexis, and actually a little bit on Bloomberg. So let's take a look at what some of these, they're a lot more than what I'm mentioning. So let's see, just under the A's, Adoption Act, Appointment of Tort Responsibility Act. These are all draft laws that these experts put together and say to the states, hey states, we think this is the right way to approach this particular topic. And what the states may or may not do is decide, yeah, we think this is a good idea, and they will adopt it, but they might change it a little. So each state might do it slightly differently. So for instance, if we do find an act, I mentioned the Partnership Act. Let's see if this will pull it up. Yes, so it gives me the link here so I can not only view the final act in its uniform, I can see what states have enacted or are, the purple ones are enacted or introduced, or this kind of light green, and then the sort of empty ones haven't done anything on this particular act. And you can see states that are considering it. So it's actually a really useful website. So you will run across that in terms of state you're working on might have adopted these acts. If they do, then understanding that this comes from a uniform act might help you in doing further research regarding what the state had in mind. As I mentioned, it's also on Westlaw. The standardized print source is called Uniform Laws Annotated. That's where you'll find those acts. And Uniform Laws Annotated is published by West, so it's going to be on Westlaw. It's around if you're interested. So on Westlaw, so you can see if I type in Uniform Laws Annotated, as I was typing the word uniform, you can see some of the other acts come up as well. And you can get the links from there. Okay, so any questions about 50 state surveys or uniform laws? So what I wanted to do was to do a quick review on finding codes for free. Something we've talked about is cost-efficient research. The thing with finding codes online for free is it may not be that, it might be cost efficient, but it might not be time efficient, because the codes you will find online are not annotated, which means they are not your very best friend. They may be just fine if you know, I need section 4410 of public health law, I just need to read the text. Then yeah, going online is going to be okay. But if you need to figure out what the law is with regard to holding an HMO liable, in your particular state, that's not going to be the best place, certainly, to start. But let's go over what is available. And we started to look at these last time. So I'm going to start with federal and then move to state, because I kind of zoomed through it last time on federal, so I wanted to go over a little bit more detail. So there are a whole bunch of different sources on federal. We're looking here at FDSIS, and again, the risk of jumping around a little bit too much. On the TWEN site, these links you'll find under class web links, and then in the statutes folder. And you can just see these are the links we've been looking at throughout our discussion regarding statutes. So let's go back to FDSIS, sometimes referred to as FedSys, those of us who are kind of lazy. And yes, you can go straight to the US code and just sort of browse your way through to a particular section. You can also do a search. Now, the other thing I wanted to try to do today with looking at some of these websites is to sort of think about ways of exploring unfamiliar sites. So one thing I like to do, which it kind of did for me automatically, is I like to look at the advanced search. Yes, I can use the basic box and throw in my search terms like we do on Google. We all know how to do that. I like to see what advanced has to offer for me because maybe it's going to help out. So what the advanced search at FDSys will do for me, as I'm seeing here, is I can choose my particular, what they call collection. So I can say, just search the US code, because on that home page, I would be searching everything. And then I can search in different parts of the US code. I can do chapter title, and just sort of, I like to just investigate my options. Again, we're on the web, so none of this costs anything. And then I could do my search. And yes, this is not a great search HMO, but again, you don't need to watch me type. So here we see the results, not exactly easy to read. So the other thing we want to do, and all of you were great, by the way, in our state statutes exercise in remembering to update. So you didn't have to bang that loud. But what I need to do online is also, so here I am looking at the US code, and I want to see, okay, how up to date is this? I can't really tell very easily, can I? Maybe if I go back to my listing, I can look in here. Edition 2010. So for whatever reason, it's pulling up the 2010 edition. No idea if that's the most updated or not. FDSys, not my favorite source. GovInfo is going to eventually replace FDSys, at least so we are told now. Who knows? They never changed their mind. It's been in beta for over a year, which isn't unusual. And it has progressed in the last year. It's got more materials. So again, we can just throw in a search. Again, I like to look at the advanced search. So it's going to let me refine by collection. So we can do US code. And then I can do full text and different. So sort of the same. Let's see if it's any better about how to update, and update. Don't want to forget that. That's part. So it kind of is a little bit better on letting me know what I'm looking at, again, being bibliographical aware. The results are the same because it's the same database. It's essentially just a new interface to the same information, GovInfo. There's some details I could look at. I could narrow by year. So again, is this most current? I don't know. It would take a lot more digging. So this is the site I like best. And again, this is not to say you have to like it best, but I like it best, first of all, because right up here it tells me that if I want to find for currency information, click here. If I want to do investigate advanced search, so search inversion, current, I like that. It's telling me current. I don't have, if what I want to find is the current law, which is most of the time, I don't have to mess with trying to figure what's current. And I can search in title, so I have some advanced options. And I'm going to be rather simplistic with my search terms. So here is where I see it, but I have some more confidence that it's the law today, and actually I see a date here, February 13, 2017. Look more carefully to see what that means, but other thing I like is it gives me all this nice information. Text contains those laws in effect on February 13th. That's pretty up to date. That, it gives me other, if I want to go to other information, the amendments, and then of course the text. So again, I do a sample search, look at advanced, see what the updating information is. Another source that is not governmental, this site, by the way, that the one I like is the House of Representatives version of the US code. So the way I get there if I'm Googling is just I type in US code House Representatives, or I go to a link somewhere. This is the Legal Information Institute. Many of you use this before? Any used Find Law? These are different legal portals. I'm sure you've heard the word, where you can get lots of legal stuff, another technical term there. I like Legal Information Institute. It's out of Cornell Law School, so that's a reputable institution. It's been around, Legal Information Institute's been around a really long time. Not that that makes it great, but it has been reliable for that long a time. So here I've linked directly to the U.S. Code, and actually I don't like it quite as well as the House Code, because it's just, again, that updating question. And the other thing, they changed this over time. It actually used to be better. So I could get directly to a section, because honestly, if I'm going on the free web for the U.S. Code, it's probably because I just want to read the text of the section. Again, it is not annotated, so it's not my best friend. I'm just going for the straight text, just to see what it is without having to worry about getting charged by Lexis or Westlaw. I can search the LII, but I'm searching actually the entire Legal Information Institute, not just the U.S. Code, and then I filter later on, which isn't the worst thing in the world, of course. And again, I still have my question about how up-to-date it is. It's got notes here, but that doesn't really tell me how up-to-date the source is. It tells me when it was first enacted and last amended. Actually, the only way to get how up-to-date it is to know, and you just have to know this, is to go to the title, and then it tells me what the title is current through. I'm not expecting you to remember all this. What I'm trying to do is give you techniques on how to investigate sites and decide whether this is the one you want to go to when you need a free source for fill in the blank. More likely, you're going to want to go to the free web for state codes, and probably if you have to do research in a state that you're not in. And the reason that is likely is because if you are somewhere that has a contract with Lexis or Westlaw, typically, especially smaller organizations or public interest organizations, are going to contract for their state. So they're going to. So, for instance, you might go, if you have a small law firm in New York or open up your own shingle, you might contract with Lexis or Westlaw and just buy New York State and maybe federal materials, if you even have a federal aspect to your practice. But New York State materials. So if something comes up and you have a client in New Jersey or California or Montana, you're not going to want to pay the umpteen bazillion dollars Westlaw Lexis are going to charge you for going out of your contract, because you're a solo practitioner. You maybe haven't made all your piles yet. So that's why you might want to go online for a state code. You won't have all the wonderful annotated code features, but you'll at least get to see what New Jersey or Montana or California has to say for whatever your issue is. Let's first look at New York. Again, you can get to this link by typing in New York statutes. It's actually a few clicks in if you do that on Google. The link is on the course homepage. You can also find links to state statutes through, again, our friend at the Legal Information Institute. And just to show you, this is what the homepage looks like. And to get to the state stuff is just get the law. And then law by jurisdiction. And the trick is not wiggling the mouse. And you actually see you can get uniform laws here as well as federal law, which we saw earlier. And I go to listing by jurisdiction, and then listing of states. Go to New York or fill in whatever state you want. Back here in New York, just so you can see. So you can see the names of the codes, like I was discussing with several of you. Some states name their codes, like California, Texas, and New York. Some states like New Jersey, and I'm pretty sure Florida don't. They just have a crazy numbering system. If you wind up in Illinois, it's a totally crazy numbering system. It's like number, dash, period, number, dash, dash, a whole bunch of different. You just have to follow it along logically. So what I like about New York, and actually they didn't used to do this 2 years ago, I don't remember about last year, but 2 years ago, it tells you how up to date it is. So someday someone in New York heard me bang the table. Don't worry, I don't think it was they heard me. But anyway, they tell you, more importantly, so you can get to the section. And no, it's not very pretty in terms of reading it or easy to read, but you get to the text and it tells you how up to date it is. So that's free codes online, federal and state. Any questions? Okay. So we have come to the end of the statutes section of our investigation. And what I wanted to do is just to review a little bit. And then I will distribute the assignment and hopefully go through some questions that might arise. So let's step back and look at the forest instead of the trees. For statutes, what are some of the themes that have come across to you? I see some cogitating going on there. Yes.
Session law versus the codified laws.
Excellent. Session laws versus codified laws. So we want to look at codified laws. Why?
Because it will have this.
As it is today. And the secondary reason, which admittedly is secondary? Not secondary source, second reason. Anybody help Steve? He did such a good job. Organized by subject. So yeah, usually you're looking for law on a particular topic, right? So if it's organized by subject, so I keep on telling you to look at the table of contents because you might find other related sections. Speaking of table of contents, another theme? Annotated codes? Are our friends, yeah, and we look why? Very best friend, yeah, absolutely. Why? Citing references and notes of decisions. Pardon me? Trees?
That's fairly
Secondary sources. I don't know if you meant treatises or I'll give you that one. So secondary sources interpreting our section. Difference between citing references and notes of decisions? Not hugely important, so I wouldn't call it a theme, but sort of. I'll give you halfway there. Citing references does just cite to the section. It may not explain the as a secondary source, it may not explain the section. As a case, it may not interpret the section. Notes of decisions interpret the section. Other themes? Always update. That's a good reliable one. Absolutely. Update. So the difference between updating your resource, Lexis, Westlaw, Bloomberg, print, versus amending your section. Again, you want to be clear on that. So get to the section. Here on Westlaw, updating. So think currentness is updating. And Westlaw doesn't really give us great info. It just says current through the chapters and the year. So that's updating Westlaw versus amending, enacting is the first one, our section, and then amending it subsequently. Remember, and amended by each semicolon, with the last one being the last time our section was amended. If you have an issue that you think is statutory, but you don't know much about it, where are you going to start? Yay, second, yeah, see, great instinct. Someone else had that too. Secondary sources. Yeah, question.
Why did that Westlaw didn't have a code this year if it was the US code like that's for?
Good question. I don't know the answer to that. I'm actually going to write down and ask because they actually used to give a date, which was, I think, more useful because Lexis here to the top. They actually not only give us the year, but they give us the date. Worth reviewing. But somewhere or other. That's a good question. I don't know why they changed it, why they don't have it anymore. See here on Lexis, in terms of when Lexis was last updated, right here up top, current through 2016 release chapters. So at least they give us the year, and as you said in US code, they don't even give us the year. I will find out if there even is an answer. US code currentness. Other questions? So we want to go to secondary sources. Even if we're starting with the statutory issue, because the controlled vocabulary, the very limited vocabulary. Remember in the USCA, our relevant section for preemption didn't mention preemption in the text of the section. You might find it because it mentions it in notes of decisions and other parts of the annotated code. Another reason annotated codes are our friend. But if you didn't know to search for the word supersedure, and even that you'd pull up a bazillion other sections, because I'm sure there are lots of other sections of the code that use the word supersedure. So very controlled vocabulary. So secondary sources talking about the general area going to be more likely to be successful in finding relevant code sections. I already mentioned table of contents. Another theme for statutes, I actually mentioned it to a couple of people down in the workshop, but not everybody. What other section, when we want to look at the table of contents for other relevant sections, what specific type of section do we want to keep our eyes open for? Remember, law is words, so we want to know definitions. Definition sections, there might be a separate section that says definition within our article or chapter, or there might be a definition subsection within our statute section. So definitions are, I won't say that will always be very relevant. Sometimes you'll see definition sections and the words don't matter to your issue, but you want to make sure you know how that statute defines any of the terms, so you know if they are relevant, you know how they are statutorily defined. The same thing. And then not so much a theme, but we took a look at Shepard's and key cite for statutes. So a way of finding other cases that cite to our statute in the citing references and just other ways of manipulating the information. So for instance, in Shepard's, we can see cases that cite to the subsection. In the citing references on Westlaw, at least in New York, we can see cases in a particular department. Those are getting detail-y, so that those are more trees than the forest, but some of the things that we took a look at. Any questions? Okay, the assignment actually should be available on Twen by now, but before I leave today, I will double check that. And we are continuing with our same beverage hypothetical. In fact, all of the assignments will be using that. So a couple of mechanics that I'd like to point out to you in the hopes of eliminating some confusion. So for part 1, I'm asking you to look back to assignment 1. And asking you to list the most relevant New York and federal statute sections that you found. And indicate which secondary source you found them. So if it was New York JUR, if it was AmJUR, if it was ALR, let me know. If you didn't find any, that's okay, just state that. But make sure you fill in and say none, so I know that you addressed the question. Part 2, I'm asking you to look at all 3 services for our issue, and then answer each of the questions for them. What I ask you to do, because it's going to be much easier for me to see what you're doing, and honestly it's going to be much easier for you to do the assignment if you answer all of the questions for each of the services. So if you're going to start with Bloomberg, because you're going alphabetically, answer questions 1 through 10 for Bloomberg, then go to Lexis and do 1 through 10, then go to Westlaw and do 1 through 10. You will notice there are a couple of questions where I say, for instance, question 1, use a plain language search in Lexis and Westlaw, not Bloomberg. Of course, Bloomberg doesn't have plain language. So, question 2, I'm asking you to use all services, and most of the questions will apply to all of the services. Question 5 is another exception, just Westlaw, use the index. And actually, for questions 7 through 9, you get to choose Lexis or Westlaw. And then question 10, I'm asking you to compare all 3. I will be asking you to go to the print, again, because I think that print statutes are still used. So you get to choose between, so this will be for New York, you get to choose between McKinney's or CLS. So again, McKinney's is the black, CLS is the blue. Up to you which one you choose, just let me know. Again, keep track of when I'm asking if your section was last updated, that means the resource, as opposed to last amended, that means the section. Some compare and contrasting. Part 3, we look at federal codes. So I'm asking you to definitely do Bloomberg, because I want you to have some experience with Bloomberg. I know it's probably not any of your favorite, because it's never anybody's favorite, but have some experience with it. And then you get to choose, well, I'm asking you to choose Lexis or Westlaw, but choose your least favorite one. And I'm doing that because you're probably used to your favorite one. So get some experience with your least favorite one, because if you wind up working somewhere that uses your least favorite one, you want to have some experience. And then some analysis for part 4. Again, please don't hesitate to ask me questions. The what do you mean by questions? I do my best to try to make this as clear as possible, but I don't always succeed because that's the nature of the English language, any language probably. If you're confused about amended versus updated, come ask. If you're confused about anything else, come ask. Email. I will do my best. About the only thing I typically don't do is I don't look at email on the weekends. I need some time off. But I will get back to you on Monday morning as soon as I can. Okie dokie. That's it. Go home early and have a happy Valentine's Day. Enjoy next year. A little extra time.